launch of the Welcome to Our Homelands video and study guide. Sorry, there was a note just came up on my screen. We'll be starting in a minute or two, so bear with us. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll be with you in a second. We're just going to wait for others to join us.
I think that's our cue.
Yes. We'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll start, respecting everyone's time. Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today at this launch of the multilingual expansion of the Welcome to Our Homelands video and study guide. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from our Welcome Centre in East Vancouver, located on the traditional unceded land of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations. Here at ISSofBC, we're honoured to be able to work and provide services on these lands, playing our part both in supporting today's newcomers and in striving to reconcile present-day immigration practices with the principles of truth and reconciliation. I'm also incredibly honoured to be here with Kamala Todd, Welcome to Our Homelands writer, director and editor. Kamala is a Metis-Cree community planner, educator, curator and filmmaker. She's director of Indigenous City Media and adjunct professor at FSU's Urban Studies program. And we couldn't be more thankful that, Kamala, you've been part of this project with us. And for those of you who are not familiar with ISSofBC, let me tell you a few things. We're the oldest not-for-profit immigrant serving agency in BC, formed in 1968 and incorporated in 1972 to respond to the settlement needs of 1,200 Ismaili refugees fleeing Idi Amin's rule in Uganda. Today, ISS is one of the largest immigrant serving agencies in Canada, supporting over 25,000 clients each year through 15 offices and sites in 9 communities throughout the Lower Mainland and in Squamish and Prince George. Our over 400 staff and 1,000 active volunteers provide services in over 40 languages. In 2020, ISS launched Welcome to Our Homelands, a 7-minute video and accompanying study guide that targets newcomers and provides them with a jumping off point for learning more about First Peoples of Canada. We're very excited to now be launching the next phase of this resource with translation into Spanish, Farsi, Arabic, Chinese, Korean, and Punjabi. The video and study guide introduce viewers, particularly newcomers, to the vast richness of Indigenous peoples' values and culture, and provides helpful information, links, and terminology to increase awareness of Indigenous peoples in Canada. The translation of the resource will make these important lessons more accessible to a wider range of newcomers in British Columbia. I particularly like to thank Van City Credit Union for their generous support of the project and all the interpreters and staff who helped prepare the voiceovers and study guide translations. Kamala and I are here this afternoon to celebrate this milestone and share some further insights into the project and where we might head next in this journey. We'll end with showing the English version of video and providing links to the multilingual versions in the chat. So with that, let me hand over to Kamala to further introduce herself and the project.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Danse, everyone. Speaking to you today from the beautiful cedar forested lands of the Sunshine Coast, Squamish and Sechelt territories. I'm currently in Gibsons, but I actually did grow up all over the Lower Mainland, and my boys are also born here. So this is our home. We love this place. We're very rooted in this place, but we are not of these lands. So on my mother's side, my ancestors come from Cree and Métis homelands, from Red River Métis settlement all the way west to St. Paul de Métis settlement and areas around Edmonton. And on my father's side, he is a first generation of German immigrants. So my grandparents came from Germany. So I definitely am really grateful that I was entrusted with this responsibility, this honor, this privilege of somehow trying to put together a short video to convey some sense of the lands that people are coming to when they come here, and to also convey some sense of the ongoing truths and the need to continue to tell really honest, difficult stories and listen to those stories about our shared experiences here and what people are coming to when they come to these territories. The brief, quick history is that through my work at the City of Vancouver, definitely heard a lot from both the local First Nations, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, the urban Indigenous community, that there was a real need for newcomers to be welcomed into a better understanding of so-called Canada, that people were coming here and they weren't being introduced to the depths of history that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people have on these lands. They weren't being introduced to the diversity of languages, the diversity of laws and governance systems and knowledge systems and cultural expression that have been across these lands for millennia. And they also weren't being introduced to the truths of the ongoing impacts of colonialism and genocide and violence that Indigenous people face and have faced in the making of Canada. And so how do you tell that story in a way that reinforces that we are welcoming, that we've always been welcoming and generous, and that these lands have always taken care of everybody who comes here and wants to also take care of these lands? And how do you kind of question or help people to start to investigate the dominant narrative of Canada? And so we got to do that actually through the Dialogues Project at the City of Vancouver, which was a really beautiful way that immigrants, newcomers, settlers in general would meet together in dialogue circles with people from the local First Nations and the urban Indigenous community. And then it really blossomed from there. And Chris Friesen from ISS reached out to me because I had done the video for the Dialogues Project and just said, should we do this? And it was very daunting and a huge responsibility to try to condense into a short film. But I managed with the help of so many people who basically recorded their greetings and sent them to me and sent beautiful footage of their beautiful lands to me. And I just tried to weave that together. So I'm really grateful that we could do this. And then Corey Wilson putting together the study guide and then expanding it to the translations. I'm so grateful for Bahar Taheri's managing all the details, all the many things that go into this, and the translators and everybody who helped weave new versions that more people can now view. So thank you so much.
Well, it's a beautiful video. I'm new to it because I've only joined ISS fairly recently. And so I've said to you before, I've watched the video several times now, and every time I do watch it, I get something new out of it. And I think just the diversity and the richness of the dialogue and the people who are part of it is really wonderful. And it's tremendous that we can now make it more available to so many people. Let me ask you a question. How do you hope newcomers will use the video and the study guide and as a starting point for their journey about learning the story and the narrative of Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, so a big part of my work is really to address the erasures. So we're living in Vancouver, growing up in Vancouver, the history has been very much about the dominant colonial settlers. And that has consequences both for the local people for being erased off their land and then being excluded from decision-making and conversations, and also for the rest of us who aren't learning the truths of the land and aren't connecting to it in the ways that we should be connecting to it in terms of the beauty and abundance, but also the loss and displacement that have happened in these places. So, when you go to a place, of course, you want to get to know the land, you want to get to know the people and the community. But if you go just based on the dominant story, the media images, the education system, even what you have to learn and for your citizenship, test and all of those things, you're not going to get a very fulsome story because the colonial narrative still dominates. So this is one effort to try to disrupt that and, celebrate the beauty and the diversity that you speak of all the many people across these lands, and the fact that we've always been here, and that it's not a new country, and that the history is very deep. And to also help people to recognize, okay, so what are these conversations about reconciliation? What is it when we hear about, unmarked graves being found at residential schools? What is it when people talk about no clean water and we see these protests? A lot of people may not have that understanding. And so it is, like you say, a jumping off point, a way to kind of welcome people into the conversation, to feel welcomed first and foremost, that they are welcomed, and that we all can build a home here together. But it needs to be through respect and listening and sharing our stories. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, it will be a way for people to start that journey of learning what the stories are that you may not get from your everyday life in Canada.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful aspiration and hope. And I also think, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, that it's also important for us in the settlement sector as a starting point or a continuing point for our reflections on how we incorporate, as I said in my introduction, mm-hmm. themes of truth and reconciliation in our work, because there are tensions and contradictions just in the whole notion of working in the settlement sector when it comes to thinking about truth and reconciliation and working with Indigenous partners and Indigenous communities. So it seems to me like this is also a great resource for our sector and our staff and our volunteers and everyone connected with our work to be thinking about these issues more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, after the Dialogues Project, the Musqueam Indian Band hosted a citizenship ceremony on reserve in their community. And it was, I think, the first time that's ever happened. And it was really meaningful in the sense of the people, the new Canadians, being welcomed by the original people of the land where they were coming to. And so having more of that, and that's where you're learning, at ISS and other groups can just really deepen the sense of the lands that you're on and the stories of that place, and then how you can help newcomers sort of weave themselves into the truths of the land that they're going to make a home on.
Yeah, and that's the goes to the hopes for the future for this work. And do you have any more thoughts about what you would like to see in terms of the work that needs to be done onwards from here around integrating truth and reconciliation into our work with newcomers and immigrants?
Yeah, I guess just like we've been saying about opening up the conversation and not being afraid, and not sort of either being like, oh, that's too disturbing or that's too complicated, I don't know where to start, but to really open up that conversation. And, like it's a family, families have things that they need to work through, and we're all relatives. So just helping people to know that, yes, Canada is in many ways a peaceful country, and it's a welcoming country, but there's a lot more going on here that we all have a responsibility to learn. And so these resources can help, and then continuing to learn what those resources are and how you can connect people to that. Even just the basics of them knowing whose territory they're coming into is a really good, important step across the continent. And what does that look like? What are the languages, to recognize that there are existing laws and knowledge systems, and how are those expressed? And then how can you, as a newcomer and even as agencies, support the local nations who have been erased and left out of the story for so long, to have a voice, to be heard, to be recognized as the rights and title holders, as the people with incredible things to share and contribute. So just continuing to open that up and not kind of say, oh, that's in the past, we're fine, we're a great country, we don't need to talk about that anymore. But the healing is a collective process that we all actually need to go through. So I think, I think this conversation that's been going on for a while is really important. And to many people, it is like the key conversation in the whole country. So,
yeah, well, thank you. And, I will take that away for me personally, that piece around continuing the conversations, even when they are difficult, that's where we are and what we need to do. So I want to thank you and everyone involved in this project once again for your tremendous work. It's thrilling to be able to do, and we're really honored and thankful for everything that you've done and everyone who's been involved in this project. We're going to switch in a second, and we're going to show the original English language version of the video. And following that, you'll be able to see links to all the different multilingual versions and information about how we're going to be circulating and distributing these resources more. So thank you for everyone who has joined us today. We really thank you for your time and your interest in this project. And please share these resources as widely as possible. We really like them to get out as far and wide in the community as possible. So thank you and have a great day. And thank you, Kamala.
Thank you. Hi.
We have always been here. We are the indigenous people of these lands, the First Peoples. Canada is Indigenous land. Our roots are deep all across this country. We have been here for thousands of years. Indigenous people include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. There are over 600 distinct Indigenous communities all across these lands. There are over 60 different Indigenous languages.
Kela kasla yo nukwa tali sila okwa kayutan lach muskamak tawa deno kayutan lach kwa Uwanga paniavluk Lillian Elias Inyuving Min Maunga kai kavit kowe huktunga mani rutikran kowe naktuakun ililugu
White Haskell geld gulimlimt bijap.
Sego se wegwego arliwayos ni yung gats. Ganyuk kahaga ni wagu punjodo dat no at no wala ni wagitar lodo. Wagatanuni jigar isis. What wanu burlado gino hoda lordi na dunkwa ni ganada.
Nina Michelle Sliboy Deluisi. Atlewi unamai. Well, die, betidayo, Iris, is Hamo, Deluini, Canada.
Tansena Wakumaganak, Madeleine Nakasun, Sakaski Squintehkawin, Sakatawakutsehnia.
Indigenous communities are richly diverse. We have our own languages, belief systems, laws, but we also have common traditions. We share the understanding that we are connected to each other and all life on Earth. It's important to give back and never take too much. Our laws are based upon ancient knowledge of how to live in balance with the earth and make decisions that benefit all living things, past, present, and future. We are caretakers of our lands. In the 1500s, European settlers came here with very different values. They said our lands were free for the taking, and they took over most of our lands and resources. Ignoring our laws and our systems of governance, the newcomers said they were the founders, and they put themselves in charge of the new government. They imposed laws such as the Indian Act and Reserve System, which limited our rights and excluded us from the new society being built on our lands. They tried to change who we are as Indigenous people. For many years, important ceremonies, like the potlatch and Sundance, were made illegal. The Canadian government created the residential school system, run by churches, from the 1800s until 1996. Over 150,000 Indigenous children were forcibly removed from their families and taken to residential schools where they were forbidden to speak their languages and practice their cultures. Abuse and mistreatment were very common. Today, Canada still has much healing to do in order to have equality and justice for Indigenous people. For example, almost half of all children in the foster care system are Indigenous. Over 150 Indigenous communities in Canada don't have clean water to drink. We are still working to protect our homelands and uphold our laws. Canada has apologized for the wrongs of the residential school system. There is a movement to build better relationships and to recognize that Canada was built upon the lands and resources of the First Peoples. We have survived. We are strong and resilient. We are reclaiming control of our education and restoring our languages. We are the fastest growing and youngest population in Canada. These will always be our homelands. Our lands are our history and our future. The land is us. The land is our language.
Keep the worries that we've always had. It still lives inside.
We share this land. Let's work together to heal the wrongs of our country and build a bright future for all.
And I would like to welcome you to Canada.
Keep us free like it used to be.
I welcome you to Canada. I'm very glad that you chose this country to be your new homeland. I hope that we will meet one day as friends. Malalia.
It's a beautiful sound.
From the ground up, we'll find the path home. Feel pulled by the sun, wish I can go. We learn from the past, now we can grow. We're promised a chance that the plants show. Go big, go far, there are no limits. I wanna see change, so my soul lives it. They cut down the trees, while we blow kisses. Defend our home while they dismiss us.
It feels like home to me.